Hypernest Podcast. During this chat, we interview some of the craziest and most knowledgeable entrepreneurs in the DeFi space. And today I have the incredible pleasure to have with me Anna, the co-founder of CoW, and at this point the CEO too. And we're going to discuss, of course, about intent-based and the great revolution that CoW brought to all of us. But before we enter into the details, of course, of intent, of gasless transaction, of batch auction, and other type of auction, actually, I would like to have Anna introduce herself, tell us a little bit about your journey. I think you are a super OG from Gnosis to CoW. So tell us a little bit more, how did you enter in this beautiful world of Web3?
Yeah, happy to, and thank you so much for having me. I think I joined blockchain full-time in 2017. Back then, I was living in New York, and I was basically starting to attend some of the early meetups that I think were probably co-hosted partially, at least by consensus. And that kind of was like my gateway to understand more what decentralization is all about, and got me hooked and excited. And then in 2017, I decided to join crypto full time by joining Gnosis. And back then I think we were a team, like very small, like 10 people or so. Everybody was wearing lots of different hats, obviously. The UX back then was not at all what it is today. Gnosis was still primarily focused on prediction markets, but as part of that research, we became aware very early on that there needed to be a more efficient way for trading tokens. And this is kind of how we started going on the side quest of building different DEX designs. We were semi-successful with those. I think Gnosis has always been technically very, very strong. And then the go-to-market side was something that needed to be built out over time. So the first DEX that we had launched was it was a reverse Dutch auction, but like the UI itself was called slow.trade to really emphasize the negative UX aspect that it had, which we felt like, let's embrace it, that trading on that platform was very, very slow. So it would take a user on average like 6 hours for the transaction to be executed. We had a bunch of different problems. I don't know if we want to dive into that today, but the point being is we have basically between 2017 until 2021, when CoW launched, we had a few years of trial and error of different DEX designs that we thought would make sense and were in theory really cool, but in practice didn't find adoption. And so after going back to the drawing boards a couple of times, we came up with what is today CoW Protocol. And one of the core issues that anyone who's working on a DeFi protocol probably faces at the beginning is this chicken and egg problem. Is you need liquidity. If you don't have liquidity, you don't find users, but users will only come once you have liquidity. And so one of the core changes that we implemented with CoW Protocol was this solver competition that allowed to tap into existing on-chain liquidity. I think another topic that was huge back at the time was the topic of MEV. Back then, minor extractable value. That was just getting a lot of attention narrative-wise of, there's actually this big problem in DeFi currently, that because our transactions are publicly visible in the mempool, more sophisticated players can take advantage of that and actually extract value from average normal users. And our design provided a very unique way of protecting users against this type of attack. And so I think it was also a bit of luck of bringing this product to the market at the right time. You need to have a bit of luck for the good timing. And it was successful. And we were still part of Gnosis, but then we decided, okay, for this to get real adoption, how can we take this a step further? And we started experimenting, building our own Discord server. Before, we only had one joint, one for Gnosis, for Gnosis Safe, for Gnosis Prediction Markets, for Gnosis the Ethereum client I were running for other different things that Gnosis was doing. We had one big Discord server, and users were just confused. They would enter and like, I'm here to talk about Dexus, but all I see is Gnosis Safe. And so, we started experimenting with having our own Twitter account, having our own Discord, like really building a whole community around us. And I was successful. And then we spoke to Martin and Stefan from Gnosis and said, look, maybe taking this out, becoming independent, we can bring CoW protocol to the next level. And then we had a bunch of discussions. I think that spanned around 8 months or so until we finalized everything. And then with Gnosis Improvement Proposal 13, it was decided that CoW would become independent.
That's great. That's super. Thanks a lot for giving us a little bit more information regarding this process. And to be honest, looking at the current design of CoWSwap today, well, at least for me, it doesn't seem only luck, right? So definitely there were iterations, there were problems that we have been thinking about, this is in this way doesn't work, let's try to restructure it. So I think there are quite a few incredible design decisions in CoWSwap that are making the life of the usual traders or big traders or whales much, much better. So you already mentioned, the introduction of solvers, for sure, the introduction of all the gasless transactions. So if one transaction fails, not a problem, right? Because in the end are the solvers paying for gas, right? And many others. Would you be able to map out somehow? We have already discussed about MEV and potentially solver economy. That's pretty much connected. So would you be able to map out, let's say, problem solution? Because I think the design is kind of a beautiful connection between so many pieces that go together and say, okay, great. There is capital efficiency. There's so many things. Can you give us a little bit of a view of those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me try to answer in a structured way. Maybe a little bit of a background, just very high level. How it works is on CoW protocol, a user assigns an intent. So this is basically the sell token, the buy token that I want to receive, and that's the slippage tolerance. So basically, what's like the limit price I'm accepting to receive, and then this order enters the order book, and a competition starts where external parties that we refer to as the solvers do compete on finding the best execution route. And what they can is they can access any on-chain liquidity, they can add private market maker liquidity, and something that's core and unique to CoW is that they can also tap into other user orders. So they can match different users peer-to-peer. And also unique about the competition is that only the solver gets to execute the order on chain who maximizes the welfare for the user. So in other words, very simple, solver A finds a price point of $4,400 per Ether, solver 2 $4,450, solver 3 only 4,000, then solver 2, the one who maximizes the value he can find for the user, is the one who gets to execute the transaction. Okay, so core issues and how they're tackled by CoW. One you already mentioned is not as relevant anymore as today because gas prices aren't as crazy anymore as they used to be, but back then it was actually a huge deal, is that because of this intent-based system, users do not pay gas transaction costs in ETH, but instead, depending on whether they put a sell order or buy order, the transaction fee is actually taken from the token that they sell or buy. So basically, if I want to specify I want to receive exactly 10 DAI for my ETH, then the fee is taken from the ETH. If they specify I want to sell exactly 10 ETH and receive whatever amount in DAI, then the fee is taken from DAI. And so in that way, what it means is, A, they don't even have to hold ETH in their account, which is really nice. But it also means that if transaction costs are high, back in the day, sometimes users pay $200 for a fair transaction. In CoW protocol, they don't have to pay it because you only do pay if your transaction is actually successfully executed. If your transaction doesn't get executed, so basically it expires, then nothing happens. Your user funds are never touched. So yeah, this is one nice side effect of how the intent-based system works. Another huge issue that I touched upon is MEV. So essentially what happens in a normal DEX is you want to place a transaction, it appears in the public mempool, it says I should get 4,500 for my ETH, but the minimum I'm willing to accept is 4,200 because, since you always need to agree to a slippage, usually depending on the DEX, the default slippage is set to 0.5% or even to 1%. And that is essentially the maximum amount that can be extracted from your user order because you're now on a normal DEX signing a transaction saying, okay, the worst price I'm willing to accept is for 4,000. And now a very smart math bob on chain sees, oh, there's this transaction. So they're actually willing to only accept the $4,000 price. Okay, now what I can do is, for example, I can change the on-chain price. I see this transaction is going to be executed on a Uniswap AMM pool. So what I can do is I can go snipe in, place a transaction before this user trade, change the on-chain price point, let them execute as the worst possible price, and then do another trade, rebalancing the AMM pool, and in this way extracting the value from this user order.
The sandwich, right? Where this guy
the famous sandwich attack, exactly. And what CoW protocol does is you only sign the intent, right? You say this is the max slippage tolerance I'm willing to accept, but now the solvers actually do compete, right, on the price point that they can find for you on chain. And there's a few interesting points here. One is that the solvers, they have the internal competition and they are bound to give you at least that price. So if now the solver says, okay, I can commit to give the user $4,400, they have to provide exactly $4,400 to the user. They cannot provide less to the user. And so that's a risk, and basically an execution risk that solvers are taking. And they are professional parties, so they actually know how to account for this risk, whereas a normal user doesn't. And solvers also have the flexibility to, when they submit the intent on chain, to change the parameters. So if the slippage tolerance of a user was defined 0.5%, and the solver sees, okay, I only need 0.1% to succeed with this trade, they can do this. They can just submit it on chain with 0.1%. And additionally, obviously, they're very sophisticated players. They're also interested in minimizing their own risk. So they use a bunch of different tools that ensure that their execution risk is minimized and they actually get the max out of the transaction. And remember, they're incentivized to give the user the best price because otherwise they wouldn't even win the competition. And so yeah, that had been a huge innovation. This whole intent-based setup and like the attributed benefits of this. It also makes it very attractive for DAO traders, for example. What is an issue that DAO traders have today is if you want to make a transaction as a DAO, usually you have to go through a governance period. Let's say 5-7 days. So obviously on-chain price movements are frequent. So if you want to get an agreement by your DAO community to get this vote executed in 7 days upon approval, then you need to, of course, set up a very large slippage tolerance in order to have the guarantee that the trade actually gets executed. Because otherwise you run the risk, you just run a whole governance proposal about getting this trade done, and then after 7 days the trade fails because it's not within an existing price range anymore. And here again is something very, like the basic functionality that we have is really nice, is already like this protection that solvers give you. You can set, in theory, a very large slippage tolerance, and the solver competition will protect you to give you still the best possible price and not extract your slippage. And then obviously it's still, even though it is secured, obviously large projects who are dealing with like $10, $50 million worth of transactions, they still don't feel comfortable to put a large slippage tolerance on a $50 million trade. So we came up with an additional contract that is able to set a price based on when the order is actually becoming tradable. So once the transaction becomes valid. That's a little more complex, but it's an additional solution that we built and now is being used by a bunch of different partners that have large DAO treasuries in the space.
Includes the TWAP now, so you also have time-weighted average integrated with Safe. That it's beautiful, I would say.
Yeah, that's for people who would like to replicate more basically TradFi related strategies on DeFi, like time-weighted average price trading, what you just said. And currently only available for smart accounts, but we are working on bringing it to EOA accounts. So in the future, you should also be able to use your Ravi wallet, MetaMask wallet, whatever you're using to place these type of smart orders also from a normal EOA account.
All right, very cool. Thanks a lot for the incredible deep dive. Let's unpack it one thing at a time then. So I think that something that is ultra fascinating and not many people knows is what you mentioned, that the solver can also match peer-to-peer order. So it's a little bit the flavor of the original Wise, right? I want to sell whatever USD for Vietnam Dong. Someone want to buy USD with Vietnam Dong, and we are matched. So that was basically the original design of Wise, or Splitwise. I don't remember exactly what was the name. There was another name before. And this, I think, super cool. And I think it is also distilled inside the name. That is not only about meat, which I love, by the way, but coincidence of intent. It's basically the name behind the CoW swap. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this peer-to-peer matching. And what I will be really curious on will be what's currently the percentage of the trade that happen peer-to-peer versus the trade that happen, I don't know, with their inventory from external or internal dexes and so on and so forth.
Yeah, happy doing exactly like you mentioned. This is where we are called CoW swap. CoW stands for coincidence of ones, because that's really one of our core innovations. So how it works is essentially that on a normal DEX, or even on any other intent-based DEX, solvers or whatever the matching mechanism is, only matches user orders against other on-chain or market maker liquidity. However, for those you always have to pay fees, right? Like there's a liquidity provider fee on any of like any Uniswap pool in order to be able to match against that liquidity. And then also you have still always like some risk of MEV of someone extracting, like front running your transaction or sandwiching your transaction. And what CoW swap does is we can entirely internalize trades by matching different user orders together. And the simple approach here would be is that I want to sell DAI for ETH and you want to sell ETH for DAI, and then match these two trades together. And probably there's going to be a bit of an excess amount because it's unlikely that we have exactly the same trading volume size that we want to exchange. And then whatever's the leftover amount would be matched either against another person who is in the order book, because it's not only peer-to-peer, it's actually peer-to-peer to endless amount. Anybody, any transaction within the order book can be matched together, or the excess amount is being channeled on chain. And then, of course, it's a much smaller proportion of the trade left that would then incur the liquidity pool fee. So yeah, the simple approach is two people together, and then more advanced approach is you can even do something fancy as ring trades. I want to sell DAI for ETH, you want to sell ETH for CoW, somebody wants to sell CoW for DAI. And all these can be matched together in a ring. So there is the ability to leverage any existing liquidity that is within the order book. Additionally, there is also the ability for solvers to match against liquidity that is in the settlement contract. The settlement contract is the contract that collects the fees. As mentioned previously, the transaction fee is not taken in ETH, but instead in the sell or the buy token, and that amount ends up in the settlement contract. Is collected on a weekly basis, and then it's used basically essentially to convert for ETH and being used to pay out solvers for the transaction costs they had. And this accumulation of fees is additionally being used, or can additionally be used by solvers to match liquidity and additionally save on gas costs and on liquidity protocol fees for user trades. I think you asked about the percentage of transactions. I actually don't have the most recent number in mind. Like, it's been a while ago. I think it depends on exactly how you count, but it was around 20% of volume that is also matched against this mix of like other user orders versus also like liquidity that's within the settlement contract. Both have the same benefits for users. The other point is that basically just to look at how many different transactions are in each batch, and the average is also around 2. So obviously there is still a lot of also like on now the new networks that we roll out on the transaction time is also a bit faster. There's also a bunch of batches where individual user orders are matched, primarily if we don't see benefits from matching it against others. But there is a significant amount of batches that already benefits from this added price. Benefits from matching different user orders together.
Okay, that's super fascinating. And digging deeper in this auction, right? Yesterday night I was reading about batch auction, the new fair auction model, and all the different game theory, the proposal. I was like, okay, I'm very, very likely tomorrow I'm gonna ask. So I think there was an evolution in your auction model, right? Maybe you can spread some light in how this actually increased capital efficiency in the way how swap works.
That fits actually very well into what I just said about it being depending on like that there's sometimes also better for a transaction to be executed individually. So the thing is, the previous model was already like this very advanced. Okay, you can match different user orders together. There was sometimes certain edge case scenarios where we basically, for it's being looked at holistically, what's the total welfare within a batch. So there was situations where it might be that a solver finds a solution where the max, like where in total they can contribute $1,000 in surplus to users. But when you dive deeper, it was not 100% clear whether this $1,000 surplus was fairly distributed. So there could be a situation where, let's say, $500 was attributed to user A and $500 to user B, just like equal split in the middle. But if you look more deeply, actually, maybe that wasn't the proportion of the trade sizes of the users. And if you look more, like it's really hard to define what is fair in the scenario. You could say, okay, but user A had contributed 60% of the volume and user B only contributed 40% of the volume. So is it fair that each of them equally split the welfare that's being added to this execution? Or would it be more fair that user A gets 60% and user B only 40%? And for this to come up with an approach that is fair across all different potential hypothetical batch scenarios, we launched a new mechanism around 2 months ago, the fair combinatorial batch auctions, that now allows us to parallelize different auctions. So what happens now is that solvers, they can provide multiple solutions in parallel for different combinations of user orders. So where in the past they would say, okay, there's 10 orders in the batch, I can all execute them together and the total welfare is 1,000. Now they can submit multiple bids, one bid for all 10 transactions, my total welfare that I had is 1,000. But I can also just submit those 5 orders, and there I can maximize 600, and for each individual order, I would be able to get X. The point is, we can now compare what is the maximum welfare a user order would get if they were individually submitted. So now, for a user order to be included in a batch of multiple transactions, the welfare that is being distributed to this user order has to be at least as high as when this user order would have been transacted individually. And that allows us now to apply a very fair mechanism on how this added welfare is being distributed to different users. It also has a second benefit. It significantly increased the speed, because previously, sometimes what will happen is that the winning solver, who found the highest surplus, did not include 100% of the transactions that were in the order book because they didn't have a route included, for example.
Yeah.
And then what would happen is that this user order would wait for the next auction to then hopefully be picked up by the winning solver. And that caused delays. Whereas now what happens is you can have multiple solvers submitting multiple different batches within one auction. So now what happened previously was one solver submits one batch. That's it. Now you have multiple different solvers can submit multiple different batches. So now the result of one auction can be one batch by one solver with 5 transactions, another batch of a different solver with 3 transactions, and another individual order that's being executed in parallel.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's what I was reading about it yesterday. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. This is very, very. I think it's much. At least for my general understanding of it, it seems to me much more efficient. Did you have done any type of projection, simulation, and so on and so forth to see how much more efficient is it? Because on the surface it seems 100 times more efficient.
Yeah, I'm worried to name wrong numbers here. I should have looked it up before, but if I remember correctly, I think it increased our speed by 40%.
All right, speed, but I would say also capital efficiency in theory, right? And distribution, let's say, of surplus, that's what you mentioned at the beginning, but potentially also maybe better execution. I don't know.
Yeah, there's 2 things how we track it. One was essentially the speed, and there's a significant increase now in how quickly transactions are being executed. And the other one was essentially the surplus distribution issue that we faced previously, where we had alerts essentially when there was the distribution was still maximized on how much surplus was generated. The problem was just if it was fairly distributed, and there were edge cases where it was just not 100% clear. And it didn't happen frequently, but it was more of a theoretical issue that would happen very rarely, but still something that we would want to avoid for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I completely see your point. And also with this new auction model, there is also the EBBO, I think it's called. The one still exists, right, to protect the users, which is Ethereum best bid offer, right?
Correct. This is basically always checking that if you submitted this on, for each network, there's a few different liquidity sources defined. Let's say for Ethereum, it's not a complete list, but just to give an example, for example, in Ethereum, you would always check that a user order needs to get at least the same price that they would get if they were settled either on Uniswap, SushiSwap, Curve, and all the different, any type of underlying liquidity pool essentially that is relevant per each network, just to give additional guarantees for the floor price a user would receive.
That's fantastic. Wow, there was a deep dive in the mechanism, and I think that what we should tackle now are somehow some of the protagonists of this game, which are obviously the solvers. So maybe, Anna, do you want to tell us a little bit more about who are those solvers, right? I think you probably invented even these terms, so it was not, or at least it was not as famous as now. Are they market maker, or more like quant firm? Who are them and how they operate?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So initially, actually, we were really worried about opening up the competition in the sense of, are there going to be enough parties interested in joining this competition? So when we launched originally, and obviously like day one course of launch, there was no adoption. We didn't know how successful it would be. So what we did to just bootstrap the launch was internally running solvers. So essentially, we would build them ourselves um, and use back in the days more simplistic heuristics. So basically, use 1inch, 0x, Paraswap APIs, combine them, and make sure that always whatever is the best return from each of the APIs is the one that we suggest in order to executing the user orders, and then try to add a few like small advantages here and there of like more that would make it more efficient, and the ability obviously to match orders together in a peer-to-peer manner. And that was the origin. And then I think it was what is it called? Dev Connect Amsterdam was, I think we were live for 1 year at this point, where we decided to try to give it a try and open up the competition. And we were hosting a workshop. And we're really surprised, like positively surprised by the turnout. There was a few like random people who were just very smart, who joined the workshop and started like basically hacking their own server together. And 2 of these became later on very successful participants in the server competition. This is how it started. And then of course we were initially also like trying to like make more advertisement around it. We spoke to market makers. We also onboarded 2 market makers to also join the competition. And then we also spoke to other projects, like to everybody who runs their own DEX aggregation API, to operate their own solvers. And did more hackathons essentially. And so I think we can see a sophistication of teams. Like initially it was a few more one-person people teams that were like just really being in a back room hacking away. And as it became increasingly profitable, of course, also the competition professionalized more players entered the room. And then also the solvers that were initially one man shows or one woman shows, even though I think it was primarily men, unfortunately. They then of course also had more money that they could use to build up the team, and so most of them onboarded like 1-2 more people, just to have different experts to accelerate also faster the deployment on more networks. The support of the newest type liquidity sources that would come in, and to fine tune here and there like some gas improvements. So we have a really healthy competition. We have above 30 solvers on mainnet, and we have a lot more teams that are currently reaching out who would like to join the competition. I think most of them, we try to get them to first deploy on some of the other networks like Arbitrum, Base, Avalanche, to ensure that the competition there is as good as the one on Ethereum, which is very strong. And yes, so far it's been a very positive journey. Like we are really positively blown away even today how quickly we managed to get adoption from externalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. In my opinion, this is really like you're almost part of your R&D department, because on one thing, if you are one company, you're doing, let's say, DEX aggregation, you're kind of constantly improving your router. Okay, good, but you're one company. And in this case, you're almost opening up a marketplace where you're connecting users with people that produce the best execution. It doesn't matter how they do it. They have their inventory, they get it from there to there, from a SEX, from a DEX, they do arbitrage, doesn't matter. As long as they're able to produce the best result for the users. And I think this is extremely interesting, but it's interesting to see that at the beginning you were not opening up to everyone. So it almost came up as a surprise in a way, but then I say, okay. So when did you realize that that one was the way to go and it was a crazy superior way?
I mean, to be fair, it had always been our intention to open it up as a marketplace. Okay. We were just worried on how quickly we would actually find adoption on this. But the reason we always wanted to open it up as a marketplace is just that it's always going to be more competitive if you have a lot of teams, individual teams working on it, rather than just us being one team, right? Like we can come up with one very, then we would be very comparable suddenly to like 1inch or 0x or whatever, right? Just having one aggregate, like API to of like, here, this is the best route we believe we can find, is never going to be as competitive as having 30 different teams who all can specialize on different angles, on different type of exotic token pairs, etc. And so, yeah, the goal for us had always been to open up to this competition. This is also where we started incentivizing solvers fairly early on, basically paying them paying them for the execution of the user order. And I think that's also one aspect of our competition that is very outstanding compared to now 1inch Fusion and Uniswap X models. Because in their system, solver, like they call them differently, because you're right, we innovated this whole competition cycle. We started calling them solvers, and then 1inch and Uniswap 1-2 years later started launching a very similar model, but they call them differently. I think Uniswap is calling them fillers, and 1inch Fusion is calling them resolvers instead of solvers. Point is, the incentive mechanism is very different. On 1inch Fusion and Uniswap X models, what happens is they're not being rewarded. So their type of solvers, they have to extract value from the user to make worthwhile their operation. So obviously those solvers, they don't operate for free. They're not just doing it for goodwill, but they're doing it because they see an opportunity to make profit. And on the other systems, they're not being rewarded. So the only way for them to maintain the operations is by taking a cut from the execution price that they give the users. So when they think about what execution do I give their users, they already deduct whatever amount they want to keep in their own pocket. On our model, it's different. We do pay out weekly rewards to solvers. And how we do it is actually really interesting, because we still want to maximize, of course, the value that they are giving to users. So what we do is a second price auction, meaning we reward solvers according to the winning solver, according to how much better their execution is compared to the second best solver. So the thing is, what otherwise would happen is that solvers would see, I can give a better execution than the second best solver, but I'm just going to give 1 cent more, because 1 cent more is all I need in order to win the competition. So what we do is we incentivize them to bid as much higher than the second best solver as possible. So we look at what is the difference between the best solver that executed on chain, the price they provided, versus what the price would have been of the second best solver. And the larger the difference, the higher the reward we pay out to solvers.
Okay, that's what I was studying yesterday. That's very fascinating. And so, because you touched briefly on Uniswap X and also 1inch Fusion, they don't have this type of auction model in place. No.
Correct. Again, they have a few differences. So one is how they are rewarded. They don't have rewards, so their solvers, etc., they just take the money directly from user orders. Secondly, sorry, I just had a noise in the background that distracted me for a second. I don't know if you can hear that. So that's one. Secondly, they operate, they are not capable of matching different user types together, right? They can only operate one transaction after the other. So what we can do of like we match against other different user orders, hence you don't pay underlying liquidity, protocol fees, etc. We reduce gas fees. They can't do this. That's the second difference. And then the last difference is it's been a while that I studied this, but they're using, as far as I remember, both of them like an auction model where they basically start where the price is high and then the price reduces over time, and then when there's harvest,
right?
Yes, exactly, Dutch auction, and then the solvers would start bidding. And it was weird in the past. I heard some negative feedback from solvers that were joining both our competition and theirs, that they had to stake 1-inch tokens in order to participate, which really reduced the competition. I'm not sure this is still the case anymore, probably not. But I think the auction design makes it impossible to basically match different user orders together. Because these auctions start as soon as a transaction gets into their order book. And it's very unrealistic that another user order, let's say like they have US DAI or US against USDC with our transaction, someone else USDC for DAI, that those auctions very likely not going to launch at the exact same moment in time. So there being a delay, and when the Dutch auction starts and the price decreases, makes it very unlikely that solvers will ever be in a situation where they can cross-match the liquidity between the different auctions. And I think one fact that just speaks for itself is the concentration of the competition. I think Uniswap and 1inch have very large density of, I think, 2 solvers that are also market makers that do the vast majority of the transaction volume. And I think the dashboards probably show that they have 15 solvers or so in total, but like the majority just doesn't transact any volume. And for us, it's a very diverse competition. Also, I mentioned that we have 30 solvers before. I don't think all 30 solvers, I mean, obviously also not all of them are equally good. Also not all 30 solvers are super active anymore, but I would say 26 are still very active today.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for giving us also a little bit of an overview, right, of how the different kind of intent-based infrastructure works, because that makes, I think, a big difference in them for the user, for capital efficiency, for the execution, and probably a lot is also visible in the volume that are done, without saying more than that. But apart from that, how do you become a solver? I mean, I was checking a little bit more. So how do I become a solver for CoW? What do I need to do? How do I qualify?
Honestly, it's been a while that I've been out of this, like directly engaged in being onboarding solvers. We have a team now who handles this. We also have documentation for it. But the easiest is really reach out to me, to the team on Twitter, any of our social media handles, and we will immediately put you in touch with our solver team. And they manage this onboarding. They have like a blurb that they can share with like, hey, first resources for you to look into, to dive into is this and that. It's pretty straightforward, and I think maybe on a high level to answer this is, I think, one good way of seeing if you like first steps you could take is one, of course, reading the documentation, and then secondly is to play a little bit around with what is open source. So like the simplest kind of solver integration that you could do is use an API of one of the existing DEX aggregators, or ideally 2, put them together, and like always do have the selection model, whichever one pops out a better price is the one you execute with. And that's kind of the starting point. And then you start iterating and like adding nitty-gritty details that make it more sophisticated and competitive in the competition. But we're super happy to help. So just reach out, and we have a full team that can support you in the process.
Fantastic. And then when they enter inside, let's say, the ecosystem, they need to have a sort of bond, right? They can be slashed if they act maliciously, right? Is it
correct?
Part of the,
correct.
Make sure that they do produce value essentially for the whole ecosystem, right?
Yes. So I can explain this a little bit more. As you had mentioned previously, for example, this EBBO requirement, right? Like let's make sure that a user order gets at least X. So user orders are protected. User funds are never at risk. The only thing that is at risk is basically the slippage tolerance of a user. So what theoretically could happen if a solver acted maliciously is that they say, oh, I'm able to find this user a price point of $5,000 for their ETH. They commit to it. They win the auction. They get the right to execute the transaction. And the limit price of the user was set to $4,000. So the user will always get their $4,000, but they were promised $5,000, right? So this difference, like the slippage tolerance of $1,000, is theoretically something that the malicious solver could steal. Obviously, it would significantly harm their reputation. They would lose any rights of remaining in the competition and thus lose any opportunity to make money in the future. And of course, the user is being refunded for this. And for this is exactly this bonding pool in place that you had mentioned. For a solver to be able to join a competition, they need to either create their own bonding pool or join an existing bonding pool that, in the case of a solver acting maliciously, can then be slashed. The solver is being slashed, removed from a competition, and the funds of the bonding pool are being used to reimburse the user for, again, just the missed slippage. The limit price of the user is never at risk.
Honestly, I love the way how you are really, protecting the users, get the MEV and giving back the MEV to the users, also in terms of surplus. So in essence, the whole competition, it is to provide somehow the best, execution price, to the users. And I think this is very, very good. And this shows that because very often CoW swapping is just the best way to swap. And that's it. I know because I do a lot of swap on chain and very often I use a product.
I mean, this is really our mission, right? This is why we are in the space. Like for us, any kind of core product decision we take always is with the user in mind. Like we are doing this because we believe overall blockchain has significant advantages over TradFi. But it also has disadvantages, but we believe those disadvantages can be removed, but they have to be removed in order for blockchain to succeed. And that's what we are working on. I believe that blockchain is so much stronger in the capabilities it has than traditional systems. But it was just the existence of MEV makes it much less likely that it will ever find large adoption. So we need to focus on this and solve it. And that's our objective. We want to provide a smooth experience that ensures that the user is put first. And that even though blockchain is still not where it should be in terms of user experience, there's still a lot of hurdles, at least that we protect them and ensure that they're not suffering from any attack or losses.
That's fantastic. Changing a little bit gear, I would like to touch briefly on another part of your protocol, right? Because there is CoW swap, but then there is also CoW AMM. And from my understanding, you're also tackling another big problem, right? There is another elephant in the room. There is not only MEV, but there is, of course, LVR, right? That's another big one. And I think you were using your superpowers here with Solver to try also to mitigate this LVR. Maybe you want to tell also a little bit more about it, because I find it ultra fascinating.
Yeah. So exactly what you said, we are in this business of protecting users, and right now one of the biggest focus to tackle is MEV. And MEV comes in many different forms. Yeah. And one form that CoW Protocol didn't cover, because it's a different type of MEV, is the MEV that liquidity providers suffer from. CoW Swap itself doesn't have or didn't have in the past native liquidity pools, so that wasn't a type of MEV that would touch our users. But it was a big problem that we took notice of and decided to bring our solution to the market, because we had something in mind that fixes this issue. What is LVR? Maybe briefly discuss that. Loss versus rebalancing. So if today, as a liquidity provider, you deposit tokens into Uniswap, you're passive, right? You always take the counter side of a trade. The thing is that the price finding today still takes place, unfortunately, on Binance and not on Ethereum. So on Ethereum, you will always trade at an outdated price. Assume that on Binance now Ethereum just is on the rise, and it just increased from 4,500 to 4,550. Fingers crossed. I don't even check daily anymore. It's like two.
I already mentioned 5,000, so it's good. We're going the right direction.
Good, perfect. And so what happens if you provide this liquidity on Uniswap? There's gonna be an arbitrageur who's gonna basically buy from you at the outdated $4,500 price, so they can sell it on Binance for $4,550. So they make $50 profit on each of your ETH. So you're always at a disadvantaged position as a liquidity provider, and that is something that we can solve by allowing to trade against this liquidity pool liquidity only as part of a CoW batch. So we launched our own liquidity pools that you can only access, you can only trade against these if you go through CoW protocol batches, which means that there is no arbitrage traffic that hits this liquidity. So what happens is I want to trade against this liquidity. The liquidity pool would theoretically still think the ETH price is 4,500, the Binance price is 4,550. Somebody wants to get this access of this liquidity that's in the pool. They submit their orders, like I want to buy this ETH for this price. They submit the order. There's a bunch of other orders in the order book. The solvers look at all orders that are part of the order book and they start matching them together. And they see, okay, there's actually a total welfare we can make from this trade by now seeing that there's this additional $50 that we can make derived from the price difference. And this additional $50 is now being split between everybody who's part of the batch. So the liquidity provider are first-class citizen of the CoW batch. They're not perceived as, oh, this is like an on-chain liquidity pool that we execute against, but it's a first-class citizen. It's like equal to any of the other transactions that are in the batch. So this extra welfare that can be found is split equally between the AMM and whoever's trading against it. And this way you guarantee that there's no one-sided extraction derived from these price differences that exist between SEX and DEX liquidity. I think you're muted.
It's a problem. It's a problem I have for so many years. So I think it's great that basically you are capturing it and you're basically bringing it back inside the pool in the end of the day. So there's basically a crazy amount of mitigation because the only arbitrageurs are essentially professional solvers that they need to obey to the same rules inside CoWSwap basically. And the liquidity providers are one of the users essentially of CoWSwap. Is that correct? All right. And how, that's super fascinating. And how, what is the complementarity? I mean, I assume that there is a complementarity between CoWSwap and CoW-AMM. So is also CoW-AMM producing, maybe more capital efficiency or filling some batch thanks to the availability of liquidity, I guess? How does it work together?
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, since it is a first-class citizen, it's treated equally to any other user order. That now adds a third type of coincidence of one's liquidity. I mentioned previously any other user orders, the fees that are collected in the settlement contract, and now the CoW-AMM liquidity. So by trading against that liquidity, again, users save significantly on gas costs, and also no protocol fees are being paid. So that's why LVR is avoided. And the liquidity providers earn just from this price fluctuation difference and not losing anything to LVR. There is no protocol fee that has to be paid when you trade against this liquidity.
Okay, and
so overall, sorry, just to summarize, it makes trading on CoW even more efficient because there's additional liquidity that no other DEX actually has access to that is unique to CoW. That comes at a zero protocol fee that has to be paid. and increases gas efficiency.
All right. Okay, that's very cool. And this is in collaboration with Balancer. So what is the relationship between CoW and Balancer?
Yeah. So theoretically, we could build this on top of any existing liquidity pool. But we have been having good relationships with the Balancer team dating many years back. They're also a very technically strong team, and so we decided to partner up and build the first version of CoW on top of Balancer pools.
Well,
maybe a little bit of alpha is like the existing version, without going too much into detail, that it still had some drawbacks, and we are currently back at the drawing board and working on an improved design model that would not, the current one is launched on Balancer V1, and we're currently working on an improved version that would launch on top of Balancer V3 with a lot of advanced capabilities that we would be then supporting, but it's a little bit of alpha, so I'm not going to dive more into it.
Alright, so it's coming, but there is probably a CoW and V2 or something like that, I assume. All right, well, because you introduced a little bit the alpha season, is there anything else, that you're going to see in the really next future of CoW Swap? So is there anything that you're cooking that you want to share with us? Any additional interesting innovation that is already in your pipeline?
Yeah, we are cooking a bunch of things at the moment. We are also cooking a bunch of interesting partnerships, and for that, we also need to provide a larger network support. So we have a more ambitious network rollout plan, which is also including Solana. We just launched our initial version of cross-chain CoWs, which allows users to trade and force them back between different networks. That was our V1, but we are in the background working on a significantly more sophisticated approach that will allow users to leverage coincidence of ones across different networks. So if you are on Solana wanting to sell your Trump NFT and someone on Ethereum is interested in buying it, that there's a possibility to match these different trades together. So to have a much more united and sophisticated way, a much more efficient way of leveraging liquidity across different networks. That's definitely a very big one we are working on in the background at the moment. And yeah, then a bunch of other smaller surprises that we will announce sooner than later.
All right, so very looking forward to that. And actually, you mentioned exactly what I wanted to ask, because first of all, I was sincerely pleased that there was more cross-chain functionality. But then I looked a little bit more into it and said, okay, well, I saw a lot of orders are ruled by, I think, Bungie, Rango. And I was like, okay, but what about cross-chain intent? That I think that's what you are working on. Because on the other hand, there are, as we know, a lot of bridging systems that are working very well with somehow intent-based infrastructure, kind of like across. And looking at also how Morpho V2 is structuring their own new design, I was kind of mesmerized when they say, well, of course, we're going to use curators that now kind of are similar to solvers, maybe, to do also the cross-chain bridging for the user. And I was like, aha, there might be something there. So how do you see this space of cross-chain intent evolving in the next, let's say, 12 months?
Yeah, it's not trivial. I would say the existing solutions that I have seen also come with some drawbacks, without calling anyone out, but it's also, like, usually it comes with drawbacks of like how much liquidity can you bridge, for example, in one go, what are the security assumptions, etc. But I mean, as you say, like, the market is moving into that direction, and I think one thing that is really clear is that we need to have a better interoperable blockchain environment in the future, because there's not going to be one single blockchain that's going to rule them all, but there's going to be a network of multiple successful blockchains that each will be relevant for their own community, and then people want to have seamless access to all of them. Like you don't want to have a wallet where you then have to choose as of today, oh, that's the network I want to like do my swap on, and now I bridge my things over to then do something on a different network. No, you just want to have one single balance. You don't even care what network this balance is on. And you just want to have a seamless experience. And the existing technology is not there yet. None of the existing solutions, but I think multiple projects are making progress towards bringing something that supports this user experience. And yet we are working on our very own solution. This is complex. But I think we might be sharing at some point a white paper that goes a bit more into detail in how this layout will look like, how the accounting layer will work. But I think it's really important. Like in the end, you want to have the whole thing, where the whole space has been directed. Like, see where we were 2017, see where we are today. I think we made a huge progress on like usability. But if for us who have been in the space for many years, but then if you show it, if you now get someone from the streets who hasn't been using blockchain before, and you tell them, here, place a trade, they're gonna be, what am I doing? Like, I don't understand.
From 2017, what have you been working on, guys?
Exactly. So there's still a huge gap. But I am convinced that like a lot of the cross-chain intent work that's currently been done is like a big move in the right direction.
I'm completely with you. I mean, I've been also, operating the space from 2016, 2017, and yesterday I had to just move from some assets from A to B, from B to A again, and I had to use all my knowledge, asking to forum, messaging people. It cannot be that complex, right? Otherwise, I had 50% slippage there, 30% slippage there. Why this? But anyway, apart from this moment of frustration, but it still can be very complex, even for few things. And I'm very glad that you're working on that. And I think the intent, together with cross-chain, more chain abstraction, and ideally smart wallet, or essentially all these things together potentially are already creating a better user experience that will also flourish, more. We discussed about the intent in several areas, in particular in the area of cross-chain intent and let's say more swap intent type of thing. What about other type of intent, right? Because an intent in the end, it's a want. I might want to have to deposit liquidity, or I might want to have a specific APY. I want to borrow at a specific price. I think also Morpho is using this type of new design, so intent-based for money market. How did you see this whole intent world evolving in the DeFi space?
I think for the DeFi space, I'm quite optimistic. I think last year there was like a hype where suddenly everybody wanted to make everything intense. There I'm a little bit more on the skeptical side. But I mean, like since you mentioned like whole lending protocols, we have a deep integration with Aave, where essentially a lot of the collateral swaps are being done via CoW protocol, and it's like exactly like making this user experience so much more smooth. Let's say that you're borrowing, like you put in your Bitcoin, whatever, to take out a loan of USDC. And now you actually want to get back your Bitcoin and replace it with Ether, but you don't want to have to pay back your USDC. So like the normal process would be super annoying, right? Like you go back, you have to get somehow your USDC back, so you can get out your BTC position to deposit ETH now to take out a new loan. Very complicated, very annoying. And instead now you can express this whole flow as an intent, and solvers basically take a flash loan on the user's behalf and do the entire underlying collateral swap on behalf of the user. So that's like really nice fancy things that are already possible today. And I'm sure we will see more of these. Like we are working personally, and I don't want to say too much yet, but we are actually working with a bunch of different OG DeFi protocols at the moment on bringing a few more of these innovations to the market.
And we are looking forward to that, right? Do you see also, apart I didn't know that the collateral swap via Aave was done by CoW. It's very interesting also to learn that. But do you see also a world where, in particular in the money market, trade will be done via intent, right? Because I know that there are a lot of teams working on that. Like, I would like to borrow X, paying that amount of interest rate, or I would like to lend at this specific thing, and then you can have a sort of order book where the things are matched, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think it's gonna be interesting to see how there's so many different teams also trying to build out their own solver or whatever they call them competition. Not everybody has been equally successful yet. I think there's also always, you need to have very clear understanding and idea of how these solvers can make money. Not all flows equally potentially profitable. Like there's certain flow that users would not want to pay an extra transaction fee on for like a solver to take this on. And it's also, of course, you always need to bootstrap enough liquidity for solvers to even get on board. So then you have again this chicken and egg problem. Like you first need to have an established customer base that does a lot of whatever these transactions are, because otherwise solvers are not going to come and like specialize on it. One aspect is trading, where you now have already a bunch of existing specialized solvers that do exactly that. They know how to optimize here and there and how to win the competition. But it doesn't mean you can automatically convince them to join a new competition that would mean new infrastructure costs, new deployment costs, new developer costs, joining a complex new system where they don't know yet what's going to be the return on their investment. So I think this chicken and egg problem of like bootstrapping a healthy competition around these new types of intents might also be difficult.
I see. The whole basic will make also your solver kind of a moat also for your solver, your mechanism design, because in a way they are an engine of innovation, right, for CoW.
Yeah, but it's still like you want them to focus on something new. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to do it, right? The incentive needs to be there. Otherwise, obviously, solvers are very like in the end, profit-driven entities who invest their development time on wherever I think they're gonna have the best impact from.
Absolutely. Okay, I think that I asked so many questions, about all the CoW design and auction type. I think it was super refreshing and exciting to learn so much about your protocol. I would like to know something a little bit different now that we're going more toward the end of this chat. You've been in the space for a very long time, right? So you are, let's say, super OG. And what is one of the main learning that you had building in the DeFi space? Because as you know, our audience is mostly of DeFi builders, DeFi experts. What did you learn that other people should know to survive and thrive in the magical world of DeFi?
Yeah, maybe one word: simplification. It's something that we still sometimes struggle with. I think we have gotten a lot better at it, but it was one of the biggest learnings. It's like when you bring something new to the market, don't try to be perfectionist. Don't necessarily, like we were very, and we still are very much decentralization maxis, but we also realized sitting on the drawing board for multiple years, launching something that is fully decentralized from the get-go, and then might not hit a user enough whatsoever, can be a huge waste of time. So simplify, like what's the minimal viable product that you really want to test, and like test it out early, get feedback, and then see if you're going into the right direction. The other thing is, and still surprisingly few projects in the space have their own user research team. And I think that's something that a few projects would also benefit from. Like it's like, especially teams that have a fairly large team. I think since we have been around 20 in our team, we already had a full-time user researcher. And I think that has been very, very beneficial for us in our journey. And that's definitely a recognition, like a recommendation. It's like, a lot of people in our space, we have a very like more technical driven focus, and are sometimes losing the lack of reality, having a lack of reality of like self-check on what actually users want and need. And I think having a user researcher really helps to do this reality check internally and always make sure that we don't overcomplicate our designs, but make it straightforward.
I love this. I mean, I've been doing user research for 10 years, so I mean, I cannot long it more. And it is the first person and the first guest that say that in terms of importance. So everyone say, okay, we're going to build for the next billions of users, but we don't know what they want, right? So we're going to build it, it will come. You know, but I love that you have also this focus on user experience, user research, and try to make things simpler and at the same time also useful, right? So it's things go hand in hand. I have last question for you. I know that as a protocol, you have a large possibility of integrating with other different protocols. That's the beauty of composability. What are the advantages, right, for these builders who want to integrate with you and now they can get in touch?
Maybe just to hop on what I said previously, that it's hard to build your own solver competition. That's obviously something that if you build on top of CoW, you can directly tap into. Again, we have the by far most competitive existing intent-based competition, which I think is quite beneficial to work to build on top of. And of course, we have like a grants program that it can be also financially supportive. We have a great developer support, so many different reasons, but if I had to pick one, I would probably say it's like very beneficial to tap into our existing competition.
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it has been not that simple for you. It took also a while, right? So obviously replicating it is not, snap your finger it works, but integration, it is definitely faster. And there is also all the experience, of the CoW Swap team. So, Anna, what can I say? It has been fantastic discussing with you. Great pleasure. I learned a lot. Our audience will learn a lot when they listen to it, or maybe they have already listened to it. They're already listening to it. I just want to give you my warmest thank you for participating and to sharing more about also your view about intent, about CoW Swap, about the future, of these of DeFi. And I wish that we will have another discussion. In the future.
Thank you very much for having me. It was really nice. Thank you.
My pleasure. And we will talk again as soon as what you're cooking is out. So we're gonna have another discussion about cross-chain magic, CoW Swap, CoWMMV2, and so on and so forth.
Many things to share.
If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Twitter or?
Twitter, Telegram. Actually, my Telegram handle is the same as my Twitter handle, Anna MS George. And then any like general social media channels from our company, like CoW. I think it's what is it? Discord, like CoW. You will find it easily on Twitter, etc. We are quite responsive usually.
No worries. We'll put the link in the description, but also for easiness and user experience, as we mentioned before. So everyone can click easily and get in touch. Well, Anna, thanks again. Have a beautiful day. Fantastic chat. Looking forward to chat with you again regarding the new innovation of CoW Swap.
Thank you. Talk soon. Excited.